Hello everyone, welcome back. So in this final video for this week, we're going to talk about now that we've set up some streaming tweets using the Twitter API. We've cleaned them up a little bit. We're doing a little bit of text manipulation. We've got some decent data we're happy with here, and this is what it looks like. In case just to refresh your memory, we're getting some tweets incoming from Twitter that contain either the words "I feel" or "I am feeling." And we've cleaned it up. We've removed mentions, hashtags, URLs, emojis, extra white space, right? And now we have some tweets that, there's a couple of emojis getting through, but not a big deal. So now we have some tweets that we want to pass over to the client in order to do something with inside our p5.js sketch. And we said at the beginning of this week, what we're going to do, our goal is we're going to create kind of this mashup idea between listening post and We Feel Fine. And we're going to take these tweets about feelings, that's kind of the We Feel Fine part, and we're going to get a text-to-speech library to speak them out loud. That's going to be the listening post component, and kind of combine these two things together just in a little demonstration. Okay? So in last week's examples, when we talked about REST APIs, we had a model where the client were responsible for querying the server, right? So we would do these queries and then we would send some data back, but the server would only talk back if it was being queried through a route. In this case, we want to set up something that's more like a stream, the way we have this stream here, right, based on events. So we want to be able to say when we have a new tweet coming in and we're satisfied with it down here, we want to be able to just send it to the client, right? Send an event that the client can receive. And one technology we can use to do this is this idea of WebSockets. So WebSockets are basically connections that we can open between a server and a client. And once a connection has been opened, it's like a tunnel, right? And we can send some data back and forth along that tunnel just kind of in real time in this streaming fashion. So this is perfect for what we're trying to accomplish here. There's a few ways to program WebSockets in JavaScript, but I like to use socket.io. It's a very convenient library that wraps around kind of the basic, more low-level WebSocket, and it makes it very easy to set up a kind of an event-based message system between a client and a server, or between many clients and a server, for example. But we're not going to do that kind of complicated use case today. We're going to keep things very, very simple for our example. So there's two sides to socket.io. There is the server side and the client side. So we're going to start with the server side. And looking at the documentation here, looking at the server, right, how to install, we'll see that depending on which web server you're using, you're going to use different versions or you're going to approach socket.io differently. So if we scroll down here, initializing it here, depending on what you're using, you're going to have different ways of creating the socket.io library. And we happen to be using Fastify. Remember, Fastify, which is a web server framework. So in the world of Fastify, the way that we access socket.io is through what's called a plugin. Fastify takes all the other kind of add-ons and libraries and wraps them up within this plugin framework that makes it fairly easy to work with them and kind of integrates them with the web server itself. So we're going to install this Fastify socket.io plugin into our server code. And while we're doing that, we're also going to have to install the Fastify plugin framework to begin with. Okay, so we're going to make sure we have that. And then we are going to install the socket.io plugin. Click on that. And that just basically just adds these lines, right, to package.json. And it triggers an install down here. Okay. So let's jump back to our server here. Now, just temporarily, I'm gonna comment out this log because it's gonna keep spamming the console, and I want to be able to see what's happening here and maybe use the console for a little bit of troubleshooting. So we can see it now added these new modules, and now our app is running. Okay. So let's go back up here, and now that we've done this, let's set up the socket.io Fastify plugin. So the way this works in Fastify is pretty straightforward. We're going to say Fastify dot register. We're going to register the Fastify socket.io plugin. Okay. Like so. So nothing else to do up here other than just register that plugin. Okay. And having done that, now we're able to go into our code here, and we can now program this IO plugin that we've added. So here we have this is the function in our server that's like starting the server. It kind of kickstarts the process here. There's another function we can implement here called ready. Okay, so ready is going to run, well, you might guess it, when our server is ready to go. Okay, and excuse me, it's going to take a function here with an error as a parameter in case something went wrong. So we're just going to say if there's an error, we're going to log it just in case. Okay. And then you can say, let's put a log here, say ready to go, just so we see that we're getting into this code. So I made a mistake in there somewhere. Let's see. We're gonna, okay, there it is. I had accidentally cleared the console and I couldn't see the logs. So now we can see that it's saying ready to go and that our app is listening. Fantastic. All right. So once we know we're ready, what we're going to start by doing is we're going to make sure we're going to show that we can initiate a connection between the client and the server using socket.io. And the way this is going to work is we're going to say fastify.io. So the .io here is the socket.io plugin. And we're going to define an event. So much like in the stream down here, we were using on. Okay, we're going to say on connect. Okay, so when we have a connection event, we're going to define a function that's going to run, and the parameter to that function is going to be the socket where the connection has been established. Okay. And then when that happens, we're going to log something to see it happens. Okay, so we're going to say console.logs, let's say new connection. And we're going to add to that socket.id. Okay. So ID is an attribute of the socket object. Okay, so now we've set up a little event here on our server that is going to run whenever we have a client socket trying to connect to the server. So the other side of the coin here is we now have to turn our attention back to our p5.js script, and we need to install the client-side version of the socket.io library. Okay? So going back to the docs here, this is the server side. We also have the client side. Okay, so the client side, we're going to install it much like we've installed JavaScript libraries, including p5 so far. Okay. So we're going to we're going to do it here from the Content Delivery Network, the CDN. So just a link to the library hosted on the web. And we're going to go into our, back to our code here. We're going to go into our index page, and we're going to add before our sketch. We're going to add the script tag that links to this JavaScript library. Okay. So now we have p5 and we have socket.io. And having done this, we can now go into our sketch here and we can create a socket.io object. So we're going to say io.connect. Now we're going to provide the URL where we want to connect. And in this case, it's going to be the URL of our glitch project. Okay, so we're going to say https RTA842 that's the name of the example we're writing, .glitch.me. Okay. And you see, as soon as we do this, we're getting some connections. Now it refreshed a few times because I added some extra character, but we're getting some new connections over here. So kind of going back to the server, we can see that this code ran, right? It logged this line, and the socket of ID here, this is a unique identifier that gets created every time, every time we refresh the sketch, okay? This line is going to run. It's going to create a new connection to the server. It opens a new tunnel in a way, and that tunnel gets a name and gets an ID. Okay? For our purposes, we're not going to worry about that too much, but this is good to know if you want to use socket.io for other purposes down the road. For example, you can have the server keep track of all the clients that are simultaneously connected. Maybe you run the sketch on your browser, I run the sketch on my browser, from your computer, my computer, it doesn't matter. We're all connected to this same server, the same node server, and you can start to create applications where the clients can send messages to each other through the server, which is pretty neat. Dan Schiffman has a good tutorial on that, creating kind of a shared drawing canvas using socket.io. We're not going to go that in depth here for this demonstration. Instead, what we're going to do is we are going to say, okay, now that we've kind of made the proof of concept here, we have connections that are being established. What we're going to look at is how we can get the socket.io server side to just broadcast messages to every connected client. Okay? So that means a client will be able to just connect to our server, to our app, and the app is just going to be sending tweets all the time, right? Just sending tweets. And if a client is connected, it's going to start receiving those events. And if two clients are connected at once, they're both going to be receiving the tweet events. And if they leave and nobody is connected anymore, well, our tweet events are just going to go into the void. Okay. So our server is just going to be constantly broadcasting these tweets. And the way we do this is we say fastify.io .emit, and this function is going to emit a broadcast kind of message. It's going to go to every connected client, okay? And we're putting it inside the stream event over here. So whenever we have a text here, a tweet ready to go, we're going to emit an event. We're going to call that event tweet. This is just a name I'm making up here for my event. And the parameter that's going to get passed along with it is going to be the value of our text, the value of our tweet. Okay. Now we're good to go. We're up and running again. We have some new connections that were created. So if we go back to our sketch here, now we can say on this side, we're going to say socket.on tweet. So on this client side here, if I want to respond to the tweet events from the server, I'm going to say provide a function that I want to run whenever a tweet event comes in. Okay. So I could define an inline function like we've been doing, like so, like tweet and then put in the code. Or just to show you, there's like many ways we can do that. I could also just go and define, a good old function like this. Right? If you prefer to organize your code that way, and then the parameter here would just be the name of the function that I just declared. Okay. So whenever we get a tweet event, which we've defined here, right, we emit a tweet event with the tweet as a parameter. Whenever we get that on the client side, we're going to run the new tweet code over here. So let's see if that works by logging that to the console. Okay. Now I'm not going to see it down in this console. Remember, this is my server console. So now we don't need the server console anymore. I'm going to close that, and instead I'm going to open the browser console. And now we should be seeing our tweets coming in here as a stream. This is the new tweet function getting called over and over, receiving the tweets. Okay. So what we've done is we've created a channel. When the sketch starts, it opens a socket connection using socket.io back to this server, which is the server that's running our sketch. And then once that connection is open, we are just broadcasting events here to all connected clients. So it doesn't matter if there's multiple clients viewing this website at once, they're all going to receive the same tweets, and then we can receive them on p5.js. Okay? So we went through the whole process, kind of a long convoluted process to set up the Twitter API on the server, right, to open a stream, get some tweets, clean them up, and now when we're ready to go, ready to send them, we broadcast these tweets back to P5, which is the client living inside this browser tab over here. Okay. And then it's now up to us to kind of make something with these tweets. Now, I said in this example, we're gonna get the tweets just spoken out loud using text-to-speech because just for fun. And we're going to use p5.Speech, which is a library that Luc Dubois wrote. And it basically is a little wrapper around the native functionality of the browsers, modern browsers, to provide speech synthesis and speech recognition. It just makes it a little bit more convenient to use. We could write all of this in native JavaScript if we wanted to, but why would we, since we can use this library? Okay. Now, the one catch with this library, though, is we cannot install it using a CDN or just a link. We can only download it as a file. So you can see down here, it's going to download it as just a JavaScript file that we could, save as something. I already have saved this on my desktop as a p5.Speech.js. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to include the library the old-fashioned way, just by literally having the file live on the server next to sketch.js. Okay. So that's very easy to do. We're going to just say new file. We're going to upload a file to our program here. I'm going to select p5.Speech. So by default, when we add a new file, it's always going to get added in the root directory on Glitch. Okay? And this is a little counterintuitive, but if you want to move a file in Glitch, there's no move function over here. There's only a rename function. So the way you move things around, so here I want to take p5.Speech.js and I want to have it live inside this public folder next to my index and my sketch. Okay? So I'm going to simply rename it, and I'm going to add a folder in front of it. So I'm going to say public / then hit enter, and that's going to move the file for me into the correct structure. Okay, so now my public folder here has 3 files in it: p5.Speech, sketch, and index. So let's make sure we include this into our index, because we want to be able to have access to this code. So right before the sketch, I'm going to put a new tag here, and I'm going to say p5.Speech.js. So this is another way that we can include libraries. This is live linking to a content delivery network. This is linking to a file that's existing right there on the server. Okay, so now I can access the p5.Speech stuff. Let's jump back into our sketch. So I'm going to turn off the log here for a second, just so it doesn't clutter up the console. And I'm going to make sure I am actually in this area over here by selecting the right kind of section. Okay. And now I'm going to be able to have access to all the variables from my sketch, including the p5.Speech library. So what the library does is it lets us create a new p5.Speech object. Okay. And then once you have that, you can see it told us voices loaded. Yeah, it works. We can simply, I'm going to put on some headphone here and make sure this works. Can simply say speech.speak and put some text.
Hello there.
And now we can.
Hello there. Yes, that works.
So now we can simply use this speech object and have it speak whatever we want to. There's a few features on the speech library. You can change the voice if you want to. So if you list the voices, this gives you a list of the supported voices. Here I have a whole bunch. These are ordered kind of like with an index. So the first one is index 0, right? Then we have index 1. So you have different variations on the male voice, female voices, and you have some voices for other languages as well. Okay? So for example, you could say set voice to 2, which I think would be Linda, right? So let's see.
Yes, that works.
So there's a few different voices. We're going to use just the basic one here. And it's got also other fun features like, you can play with the pitch and the rate. This is actually kind of fun. You can get it to, speak really, really slowly and distorted, but we're not going to use that for this example. But if you're curious, you can mess with that. It's kind of entertaining. So now that we can create the speech object, right? Let's go and put it into our code here. So we're going to make a global variable this time, call it speech. And then in setup, we're going to say speech equals new p5.Speech. And we're just going to keep the default voice for our purposes. So what we can do now is when a new tweet comes in, we can say speech.speak tweet.
Like thanks now I feel even worse, smiley face. I feel grateful for Biden's experience in all these. H. Right, I feel like there are more productive, life affirming.
All right. So what we can hear now is starting to read the tweets out loud. So we're going to refine this a little bit. One of the issues we're going to have here is that we have more tweets coming in than we have time to read. Okay. And at some point, these are going to start to accumulate. There might be some lulls in the data. Maybe for a while, nobody is sharing about their feelings on Twitter. So one thing that we could do is capture all the tweets as they come in. Okay, so we're going to capture the tweets, and we are not necessarily going to speak them immediately when they receive. Okay, so instead, when we get a new tweet, all we're going to do is we're simply going to save it. Okay, so we're going to say tweets.push tweet. Okay. So we're going to save them onto this list. And then in draw, we're going to check, we're going to create some kind of setup that's going to tell us if we've finished talking. Okay, so if the speech engine is finished talking, we're going to pull another tweet from the list. Okay, so kind of like this is going to create a bit of a backlog of tweets, so to speak. So we're going to pull tweets from the list, and we're only going to speak them when we are ready to do so, so that we can, if for some reason, the stream kind of slows down or relents, this will ensure that this app can keep running because we're going to have a big bag of tweets to pull from. So how would we know if we're done speaking? Well, conveniently, there is a way to do this with the p5.Speech, right? So these speech objects have properties we can define with some callback functions. So there's a function that we can run called on an event called onEnd. So we can define our own function that's going to run when the speech is finished talking, or iterance is completed. Okay. The other thing we can do also is we can use this function to just cancel any queued utterances. So one of the things that we have to know about the speech library is that it's happening in the browser, but if I run the code, say something and hit refresh, it's not going to necessarily stop talking. So we're going to do cancel here just after we create it. Make sure to interrupt any ongoing talking. So if, let's say, my program was saying a long tweet and I hit refresh here, it would continue to finish that utterance because it's kind of deferred that to the speech synthesis engine of the browser. So this will make sure that it cancels any ongoing chattiness before we do anything else. And then we can say onEnd, right? We can make that equal to a function that we define. Okay? So we'll say, what do we want to do when a speech ends? Well, an easy way that we could keep track of whether or not it's time to speak or not is simply by creating a Boolean variable. So you could imagine here we're going to have a Boolean variable called ready to speak. Okay? And we'll assume that this is true in the beginning of our sketch. Okay? We're going to say onEnd here, we're going to set ready to speak to true as well. So if we're talking and this function runs because it means we've finished a sentence, this is going to set ready to speak again. And then in draw, we're going to say if, and let's move the background in there actually. We're going to say if we are ready to speak. So in the beginning, this will be true by default. Okay. So if we are ready to speak, and we actually have something to say, if tweets.length is greater than 0, right? We're going to make sure we actually have some tweets in that array. Then we are going to say speech.speak. So first, let's grab a tweet out of the array. Oh, hold on.
Undefined.
Yes, hold on. We're going to say create let's grab a tweet. We'll say tweets.splice, right? Grab the oldest one. We could also grab a random one if we wanted to. And then we are going to speak that tweet.
Undefined. Why is everyone sad? It makes me sad, and then me and everyone is sad, and then the world's just sad, and I feel like.
And then we will
Most
say,
days I feel
ready
like
to
I don't have
speak.
parents anymore, lol. I am why baby
False.
KO. 2 months ending Paula, but I feel like you still here. I would never tell someone, and now I feel sick. Why I feel like this? Yeah, I feel the same, like when these mfers gonna show up at my doorstep with a bouquet of flowers, like damn bitch.
All right, I'm going to comment this out so I don't have to speak over my text to speech here. So what we're doing here is we're saying if we're ready to speak and we have tweets kind of in our backlog, we could say, let's do a log here. Console.log tweet backlog. Just so we see how many are left waiting out of curiosity, we're going to say tweets.length. So every time we're going to get some new tweets here. Well, that won't work until we turn on the speech. Okay, so it's going to say ready to speak equals false. So it's going to only display one tweet in the beginning. Okay? And only when speech ends will ready to speak go back to true again. So we're using this variable kind of like as an on-off switch. Okay, and only if this is on are we able to grab a tweet, speak it out loud, okay, and then do a little log here. And while we're at it, we might as well also draw the tweet. Why not? So let's do a text align. Let's make the text a little bit bigger. Make sure we have no stroke. And we're going to draw the tweet, centering it in the window. And with the text, you can specify a text box. So this is going to wrap around. So here I'm specifying a 400 by 100 text box. So it's going to wrap the tweet around. And the let's set a font. Nicer font. And if I want this to be center, the text boxes, they respond to the same alignment as rectangles. So if I say rectangle mode center, this is also going to impact the text boxes. Let's center that over here. All right. So now this is going to be the tweet that's going to get spoken, right? It's going to get displayed now. And this is, we're going to re-enable the speech so that we can actually start to chain them.
I feel so bad for my baby, can't even do none. Why is it so hard for me to express how I feel? Person standing.
Oh, it missed an
I
emoji.
feel it. I worked on a really long 4-page comic and it barely got any traction vs a single illustration. Oh, dash. I finally told my parents on how I feel about how football has been draining me out.
So,
and they support my decision.
We'll continue to get
oh God, I feel like I need a shower now.
A stream of these random tweets, and we can see our backlog is growing rather rapidly.
And be like,
right?
I ain't eating it. But I'm an ad.
I'm going to turn this off here for a second. We can also set ready to speak to false if we just don't want to go into here at all. We could set the background to 0 in the beginning. And in fact, let's set these parameters just once in setup. That would be smarter. Format the file. And then I'm going to draw a little text box here in setup that's going to say, while the connection first occurs, right? We're just going to be waiting for tweets. And if I set this to true, it's going to start processing the tweets that we're receiving. Okay? So the backlog is growing rather rapidly. It's not a big deal. I mean, it just means we have a big collection of tweets. We could program this differently as well. We might decide to only keep, the latest tweet that we received. But the reason I'm keeping a list is, again, just in case, for whatever reason, the stream kind of lets out a little bit, right? Maybe for a period of time we're not getting a lot of search results, if we have built a backlog, then our app is going to be able to continue to run. Let's say you were to set this up as an installation somewhere, perhaps it would kind of get you through these lull periods in the streaming data by building a kind of a cache of what you're receiving. So that's the reason I decided to do it that way. So let's let it speak again for a few minutes, and then I'll share a link to the completed example, and that will wrap up today's tutorial. Now this week there is no code exercise specifically, just because this example was a little bit elaborate, but feel free to play with it if you want to. If you want to give it a shot, try to build something with the Twitter API, that's fine, but there won't be any particular code exercise for this week. So with that, I will see you next time.
I feel like my display name is already proper for this month. I feel attacked not just by SVT but by carrots too. But I feel like I am being... OMG, why can't you waluigi wigglers leave me alone? I feel like all I see on my chui. We did Tom wrong, I feel.
Yeah.
I feel for you.
All right.
On my soul I've seen multiple tweets.
Take care, everybody. See you next week.
Ian Ba- Yo